consumers, the big questions with the AT&T T-Mobile merger. Will it improve AT&T's spotty wireless coverage, and how long will that take? Well, let's find out. We're joined now by Michael Mahoney, Senior Managing Director at Falcon Point Capital here in San Francisco. And interesting, you've owned AT&T and Verizon in the past. You don't own it now, but you did just buy Sprint today.
That's right. That's right. Although not necessarily for coverage reasons.
Okay. So first question, why did AT&T decide to buy it rather than build it for $39 billion?
It's a lot of money, but any other way of acquiring this kind of customer base and spectrum and network capacity would also be a lot of money. And this has the advantage that it eliminates your number 4 competitor, which any other solution would not do.
So will this actually make service better, and how long will that take? I mean, will all those iPhone users out there saying, "Can you hear me now, will that change for them?"
I think it will. It's not going to change overnight, partly because it's going to take some time for this deal to actually get regulatory approval. But once approved, if it is approved, I would say probably within 6 months, most users of AT&T's network will find a big improvement.
And Michael, what about Sprint? I can't let you get away with that. Is that a hedge in case the deal doesn't get done, or is that just the valuation is so low at this point it's got to be worth something?
Cory, I think it's a win-win. The valuation is so low that I think it probably works out well just as a standalone investment. I think there's a small chance Verizon ends up buying Sprint, and then if the deal doesn't work out, T-Mobile goes running into Sprint's arms. And how do you manage that from a portfolio standpoint? Do you ascribe, let's say your AT&T position is 3% of your portfolio, so do you put 0.5% into Sprint? Like, how do you try to judge that in terms of how likely it is and how much you're willing to bet? Sometimes we would do something like that, or we would hedge with some small short position. In this case, I'm just purely long Sprint because I think it's kind of a no-lose scenario from where the stock is right now.
I was looking through your portfolio earlier, at least your last 13F filing, and I see that you were a holder of Alcatel-Lucent, Finisar as well, so you're involved in the gear side of things too. How does that change with this deal? We just heard Tim Savageaux talking about Alcatel-Lucent. Is that something that's more interesting to you here, and why?
Absolutely. I agree with Tim on Alcatel-Lucent. We've owned it for a while, and they're clearly a beneficiary of this deal. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure spending, maybe $7 billion in incremental spending, according to some estimates. Finisar is kind of a little bit of a different play because it's not so much wireless focused, although we do like Finisar a lot at its current prices.
So why did AT&T have so many problems with its network that they couldn't fix themselves?
The AT&T essentially was a victim of its own success. They got the early exclusive with the iPhone. Huge numbers of subscribers glommed on to buying that phone, which meant lots more people using the network, but then they were using the network much more intensively because the smartphone is anywhere 2 to 10 times as much usage because of all the video you download and other things you download on your smartphone.
So talk to me about how difficult it is to build spectrum, to get more spectrum, why it was so difficult for AT&T to fix it.
There are lots of pieces of that, but in brief, the first thing is that you've got to buy the actual airwaves, and most of the airwaves have been sold at this point in the United States. There are some opportunities with broadcast TV, with the military. You can move people off of existing airwaves and then purchase the air rights either from the government or directly from them. But that's getting harder and harder to do because we've been going through this now for 15 years of auctioning off or giving off spectrum. Then the other piece is you've got to put new towers in new places. You've got to put more radios on existing towers. And lots of leafy suburbs like the ones that many people live in don't want any more towers.
Like San Francisco, Silicon Valley, where service has been so bad, right?
Exactly.
So let me ask you also, when you look at all the people who want to build towers, I think about Clearwire, and I think that they've lost the game of musical chairs here. Is Clearwire done as of today?
That is a great question. I'm very much of mixed minds on Clearwire right now as an investment. On the one hand, they no longer have T-Mobile to go to as an alternative customer, which means Sprint has more leverage on Clearwire. But on the other hand, you could argue that Sprint has no choice but to truly embrace Clearwire because they need spectrum as well, and Clearwire's got this great WiMAX network. So it's kind of up in the air right now on Clearwire. I'm not sure right where I fall on that.
But Sprint's already backed away from Clearwire a little bit. They gave up the board seats that they had there. It looks like they've kind of decided not to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't push it quite that far. Yes, they backed away and they did make some changes. They own a little less than 50% on a fully diluted basis. But on the other hand, I think the question is, does Clearwire want to do a purely wholesale strategy or a mixed wholesale and retail strategy? There's a good chance that Clearwire is more amenable to what Sprint wants them to do after this deal.
We thought until yesterday that Sprint was going to be buying T-Mobile. Did AT&T do this because they knew they had to make a big play because Verizon has the iPhone now, and they just knew they had to do something to stay ahead?
I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. I think the deal, what we thought was going to happen, and I've heard it's been negotiated for over 3 months, of Sprint buying T-Mobile, was probably pretty close to actually being concluded. And AT&T figured we can either have a very powerful number 3 competitor and kind of be searching for our next strategic move, or we can preempt that, be clearly the dominant number 1 provider in the United States, and leave the number 3 provider kind of a fish out of water. I think it's a really smart move.
All right, thank you so much. Michael Mahoney of Falcon Point Capital, very interesting to hear your views.
My pleasure.